Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. Each week, we address issues of timely and timeless concern with newsmakers and the journalists who report on them, with artists, writers, scientists, educators, social scientists, government and nonprofit leaders. We speak with each one to one. Today, I'm delighted to welcome the keeper of the New York Flame. No, not the Statue of Liberty, the Museum of the City of New York. She's Susan Henshaw Jones, president and director of that incredible repository of information about Gotham. And if that weren't enough, she's more recently taken on the helm of the South Street Seaport Museum, which took an incredible hit during Hurricane Sandy. Is she a workaholic? We'll ask her. Welcome.
Thank you.
You know, I suspect that a lot of New Yorkers have heard of the Museum of the City of New York, but haven't been there. How old is it? Where is it? And what's its mission?
It was started in 1923, so it's a venerable institution, and it went to Fifth Avenue and 103rd Street in 1932. It was at Gracie Mansion for a while.
It was at Gracie Mansion?
It was at Gracie Mansion. We moved uptown. We needed more space. So we moved into this Colonial Revival building in 1932. Mm-hmm. And so we think that our location is great because our neighbors are Harlem, Midtown, the West Side, the Bronx. The one thing interesting about the Seaport Museum is that it gives us access to the other boroughs more readily, to Staten Island and to Brooklyn.
Now, the Museum of the City of New York, how is its mission different from that, say, of the New York Historical Society?
Well, we are focused on the 5 boroughs, and that is it. That's our territory, and we consider that to be a pretty broad one. Mm-hmm. From the beginning, the Historical Society has also been concerned with state and American history.
Okay.
So our garden is the 5 boroughs.
It's the city, okay, okay. How many visitors do you have each year?
We have between 250 and 300,000 visitors uptown.
Okay.
We're in the middle of renovation that's been closing one wing and then the other wing, and so that has hindered our attendance because one wing is out. But I think in 2 to 3 years, when the renovation is done, we should be hitting 500,000 visitors a year.
Tell me about the renovation. What does that involve?
Well, I mentioned that the building was completed in 1932, and then nothing was done to it.
Was it built for the museum?
It was purpose-built for the museum.
I had no idea that you've been around. Well, I had no idea that you've been around since the 20s, even.
Yes. Well, the museum has been alive up there, Fifth Avenue and 104th. There was a time when it was considering moving out of its East Harlem location. That was before my time. So when I got there, we decided that we would just embrace our neighborhood and fix up our building, which hadn't had any renovation or rehabilitation since 1932. Mm-hmm. So it's a 3-phased renovation plan. And that means we are never closed to the public. We figured if we closed down for 4 years, everybody would forget about us. And we didn't want that to happen. So we're staying open through the whole thing. I mean, it's agony for those of us inside, but it's working in every way that we really care about. So it started in 2005, and it's going to be finished in 2015.
What's the mission of the museum?
We look at the characteristics that define New York and New Yorkers, and that is very much exploring its heritage of diversity, opportunity, and perpetual transformation. And I think there's a byproduct to all of that too, which is tolerance. We New Yorkers are shoulder to shoulder in the subways and hip to hip in the subways, and we know that we all are exactly the same no matter where we came from. I think it's a wonderful New York City truth and characteristic.
Now, looking at some of your current exhibits, you recently, one that recently opened, Making Room, which showcases the micro apartment that was commissioned by Mayor Bloomberg or his administration, the prototype for a much smaller, more affordable living space. I guess it's for single New Yorkers. I guess you couldn't get two people into that space. And tell me about that exhibit.
Well, you know, we are the city's official museum. And so whenever we can highlight the work of city agencies, we're just thrilled to do so. And this exhibition we also did in collaboration with the Citizens Housing and Planning Council. And, you know, right now, 1/3 of New Yorkers are living by themselves. Yet the housing laws do not allow builders to produce a unit that is smaller than 400 square feet. And so this exhibition looks at what a 325 square foot micro unit looks like, and it's great. I can't tell you how livable it is. The ceilings are higher, which gives you a greater sense of roominess. Everything is perfectly designed. There is, of course, the Murphy bed, but it's clever in every which way. The TV hides the bar. It is the kitchen and the dining area, and it's a very large bathroom. That's the thing that I can't figure out. So, so the deal is that a 325 square foot unit maybe is something that the city should consider making legal and viable in the city, given that, you know, my daughters are singletons in their apartments.
Right.
And I'm getting to a point where, you know, there are singletons my age in apartments.
Right. Right.
So it would be a great new venture.
Activist New York, tell me about that exhibit.
Well, that was funded by a wonderful organization known as the Puffin Foundation. And, you know, it's hard to tell the history of the city. And if you do it chronologically, sometimes you think, oh my God, this is going to get boring. So think of activism in New York City. It's been going on forever. So it's an interesting way to get a slice of New York life, New Yorkers changing their environment, that goes right back to the beginning, to the Flushing Remonstrance when we were still a Dutch colony. And of course it goes up, and that was religious freedom. And it goes right up to the present, and preservation is one of the social activism themes, and gay rights and civil rights, and we're going to keep updating it. We're going to start new themes. And it's wonderful for school children. It's wonderful for students, college students too, because it sort of gives them a vision about how they too can work towards their idea of a better future.
Right. Now, some coming exhibits, I know you have sent out a call to people to produce photographs from showing the impact of Hurricane Sandy, because you're planning an exhibit on how the hurricane affected the city. How's that? Do you have a lot of stuff coming in? That sounds like an interesting project to get a lot of New Yorkers involved in.
The deadline is March the 4th for submissions, and so I hope that everybody would in fact send their images to us at the Museum of the City of New York. Essentially, this is an idea that came from our chairman, Jamie Dinan, and it was his idea that we do a quick take on what occurred in the 5 boroughs before and after. And that's exactly what our call is for. Photographs that show what the home or what the apartment building or what the police station looked like before and then after. And we're convening a series of talks at the Museum of the City of New York on questions like the science behind climate change and what can be done. And this is obviously an area that is going to be evolving very, very, very rapidly. And the evolution of our response has a lot to do with the South Street Seaport Museum.
Which we'll get to in a moment. You're planning a Greenwood Cemetery exhibit.
Yes.
I didn't even know about Greenwood Cemetery. I had to look it up. It's in Brooklyn.
And it is celebrating its 175th anniversary. It's older than most things in New York City. And besides being a cemetery and having lots of famous people in it, it's a living space, you know. People go and have picnics and it's park-like and it's lovely. It's a whole new sort of concept of a cemetery, and it's filled with art and architecture.
Really?
Great art and architecture by the finest sculptors and architects of the day, Stanford White, Augustus St. Gaudens. I mean, it's a place that everybody should visit.
Who knew? Who knew?
Who knew?
And now they'll know. Stephen Burrows, he's an African-American clothes designer. That's an exhibit that's coming up.
He's a fashion designer.
Fashion designer.
Fashion designer. And the Museum of the City of New York has long had a costume and textile collection. And so this show very much fits in with that. And Stephen Burrows, we can remember him. He had those very sleek forms that were perfect in the disco era. And so we're opening an exhibition on Stephen Burrows in March of this year, you know, 7 weeks away. And his styles are wonderful, alive, and he was the first major African-American designer, and he's alive. And so we're working.
He is. Oh my God.
He's alive. He lives in Harlem. And so we are working with him, and we're so thrilled to work with him on this look at his life and his times.
Okay. We're going to take a short break. Then we'll be back with more with Susan Henshaw Jones, President and Director of the Museum of the City of New York and the South Street Seaport Museum.
Did you know CUNY leads the way for students with disabilities?
CUNY Leads means linking employment, academics, and disability services. If you're a CUNY student with a visible or invisible disability, the City University of New York offers eligible students free career development and placement services. To find out if you qualify, visit cuny.edu/CUNYLeads. CUNY Leads, to the career I always wanted.
Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York, and I'm talking with Susan Henshaw Jones, President and Director of the Museum of the City of New York and the South Street Seaport Museum. Has heading up the Museum of the City of New York changed your view of New York City or your sense of appreciation of New York City?
Yes, enormously. I always loved the city, but I knew very little specifically about its history. So the last 10 years have been just this wonderful education for me. It's continuing at the Seaport Museum, and it's continuing there in the sense that, you know, until the 1950s, New York's greatness as a city was completely dependent upon our status as a seaport, and the greatest seaport in the Western Hemisphere. So it has been a wonderful educational journey for me.
Now, before coming back, you had been in New York, and then you were in Washington, heading up a museum there, and then you came back. Was it 10 years ago that you went back?
10 years.
I sort of get a sense that New York City museums play a more integral role in the life of New Yorkers than the Washington museums, which I tend to associate more with tourists. Is that true, or am I
Well, you know,
wrong?
in fact, New York City has enormous visitation by tourists
Right,
from
right.
all over, and they do
Right.
for sure go to the museums, and they do for sure come to the Museum of the City of New York. And this is because I believe the name is so clear. Museum of the City of New York.
Right.
And they want to know more about the character of this city. New York City is very popular. We are very, very hot. People love it here.
Right. But what I'm saying is, I think that just as Lincoln Center is plays a greater part in the fiber of New York City life probably than Kennedy Center does for Washingtonians, I think New Yorkers really use their museums, is what I'm saying.
That's true. And for museums like the Seaport Museum or the Museum of the City of New York, we're local museums. And so therefore we have to rely on our 5 boroughs and attendance from our 5 boroughs. And we want them to become members, and we want them to come back again and again and again. And we're finding that that actually is happening. We also have lots of public programs. I was mentioning the ones in the aftermath of Sandy. So we have things going on. We have school programs. We have 40,000 school kids coming to us uptown right now from public schools. And we had 15,000 downtown before we got messed up with Sandy.
So tell us about the Seaport Museum and its mission.
Well, I mentioned earlier that our greatness as a city was based upon the fact that New York is a seaport, was a seaport. And so, you know, the Seaport Museum was always interested in our maritime past. And so there are 2 tall ships, and the tall ships sit berthed at Pier 16. They are
and these are vintage ships? These are from
they
the old
are.
days?
These are 19th century, turn of the century ships.
Okay.
Yep. The City of New York is helping us to restore the hull of one of them, which is it's in fair condition. It needs work, and we're in the process of sort of deciding how we're going to tell the maritime story, the story of the history of that district. On these ships and on these boats, we have a schooner that goes out every night from August to October. That takes school children too during the day. So we were gearing up and getting the rhythm of being essentially a history museum, but a museum with a focus at the same time on the present and the future, when we just had the body blow of Sandy.
Now, how did Sandy? Well, Sandy knocked out a lot of your. I know with the museum, the telecommunications, electrical, heating. Well, you tell me. You know what kind of damage Sandy did to you.
Well, we were all down there that Friday, that Saturday, Sunday. She hit at night. Worried about the vessels. We thought, oh my heavens, you know, we got to get the lines on correctly. And for some reason, although Upland and South Street were just a stone's throw away, we thought they'd be fine. Was that ever naive? We had a 9 to 14 foot surge. And so that meant that along Fulton Street, there were storefronts where the water, the surge water, which was nasty water, filled right up to the ceiling. You know, it came up quickly and it receded quickly. When it receded, it damaged Bound and Company and Bound Printers.
Which is a old printing shop,
yes,
right?
a 19th century printing shop.
Right.
And then there was this great thing about New Yorkers. The very Monday, the day after the storm, there were people out there saying, let me volunteer to help save this wood type, because the oldest type is wood, and that had been submerged,
Right.
and it needed to be dried
Right.
and cleaned. And so we had hundreds of New Yorkers who just were volunteers and in the cold.
Now, did the storm, did it hurt the ships at all? Did it damage the ships at all?
The ships went up and the ships went down. And that's, I'm told, what they're supposed to do.
Okay, okay. Now, can one visit can one go on the ships? Can one actually go?
Ambrose was open to the public, and we intend to get it open again this spring. And we also are working to get Waiver Tree open to the public as well. So these are things that we're working on right now.
Right. So now the South Street Seaport Museum, I mean, it's not just a, I mean, it's the ships, it's the seaport, it's the ships, it is a museum which has exhibits, and there are buildings, actual historic buildings, like the publishing, the printing company,
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. This was actually a project of the Lindsay administration that was then carried on by the Koch administration, and it was a preservation project that encompassed blocks from John Street all the way up to the Brooklyn Bridge, and they were all 19th century commercial structures that serviced the port. There were hotels, tons of hotels. Everybody remembers Sloppy Louie's, old restaurants that were there. And the district is as important as the tall ships. And so there have been many, many millions of public dollars spent to preserve the character of this neighborhood.
Is Sloppy Louie still there?
It isn't. I'm
Okay.
so sorry. So sorry. I did go.
You did?
I
Really?
did, yeah. Age is good in some respects.
Okay. So, and now the museum sustained a lot of damage to your operating, you know.
Yeah.
And that's going to cost a lot of money to repair, right?
So the surge came in, and it came in like it filled up in 4 minutes. That was the thing that was so amazing, was the speed of the surge. And so it filled up the lobby, and it knocked out the electrical power. It knocked out everything in the basement. And of course, it shows you that maybe the basement is
It's
a
not
vulnerable.
the right place to store these systems.
Yeah.
But the museum is back open. It's open now, right? It has reopened.
We are reopened. We have a temporary kerosene-fueled rented heaters that sit on John Street, and we have temporary power. And so we're waiting for FEMA.
Okay, okay. Now, South Street Seaport it's in a wonderful location and has some, as you pointed out, a lot of historic things there. Though my sense, again, is that it tends to be visited more by tourists than by New Yorkers. I mean, that's my real sense. The Bloomberg administration, I know, has proposed plans for more revitalization of the Seaport area. How do you feel about the proposal, and what stage is that in right now?
You're correct in noting that on the east side of Lower Manhattan, there is a very significant tourist population. But I must say that we were addressing that, and we were sort of righting the mix by getting New Yorkers to come down to the Seaport Museum. Howard Hughes Corporation has a very large proposal for Pier 17. I believe they're going to start work on it this spring, this summer, and you know, we hope for the revitalization of their properties, because if those properties are indeed revitalized, it will lift our boat too.
Right.
So it's right now a neighborhood in great flux.
Well, I think that, you know, our viewers can now put 2 new destination points on their list. One, the Museum of the City of New York up on 103rd Street and 5th Avenue, that's correct, and the South Street Seaport Museum.
Exactly. Please come.
We're out of time, but I want to thank Susan Henshaw Jones for joining us today. And you should pay a visit to both the Museum of the City of New York. For a list of all the wonderful exhibits and programs, go to mcny.org. And for the South Street Seaport Museum, check it out at southstreetseaport.org. For the City University of New York and One to One, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. If there are any people you'd like to hear from or topics you'd like us to explore, please let us know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.